I'm always a little bit confused by these technologies. I had to get used to them in the last 1.5 years. So I suppose you can all hear me and see me. If this is the case, then I would like to welcome you in the next session. And I hope you all enjoyed the gala dinner yesterday night in the famous downtown of Santiago de Compostela. As, of course, we missed it, I have to go back to my memories to eat virtually some Galician food when Jose Maria and Ricardo Rodriguez, now from Eurofound, they showed us how to eat Galician seafood, and Jose Maria was explaining and Ricardo Rodriguez was simulating. It was an unbelievable experience. Unfortunately, we didn't have this last night, so I have to leave on my memories. Thank you for choosing our session on disrupting industrial relations. This is a special chapter cooperation between the COGENS project and our world-famous Hungarian labor law e-journal, HLLJ.hu. If it's possible, I will share some articles from the special issue we will talk about today. We had an application process within the project. There were applications for this presentation, this session, and the papers were published in the Hungarian Labor Law e-journal in 2020 in the second issue. And I have the pleasure and honor to welcome the winners of this competition. This is such a colorful and distinguished group of scholars from all around the world. We'll have author and speaker from Brazil, Italy, Poland, and Spain, and we have also co-authors you can check in on the website. So such a variety of authors. We have the same topic, collective bargaining and industrial relations in the gig economy. Before I start with the first speaker, let me tell you just an advertisement. If you have any submission for Hungarian Labor Law e-journal, please send it to me. You can find my address on the website, or you can contact me anyway. Okay, so we will follow the order in the program. So start up with Feliciano Iudicone from Italy, who is going to speak about comparison between Germany and Italy, and then Brazil with this topic. Then our third speaker will be Emma Rodriguez from University of Vigo. And last but not least, Joanna Unterschütz from Poland, an old friend from the project. Welcome, and she will speak about hope for new developments. So this is, and if I don't want to speak too much, then I have to give the floor to Feliciano Iudicone. His lecture will be on a comparative study on Germany and Italy, and Feliciano works as a researcher at Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini. I hope I didn't butcher the name of the foundation. I did my best. If everybody agrees, then the floor is yours, Feliciano.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you for the invitation, first of all, in this final conference. And yes, I confirm my name and the one of the foundation I work for is correct. I really hope next time there will be chance actually to meet you in person, possibly very soon. I don't know if you can see my slides. Okay. So today I'm going to introduce some key findings from the Don't Gig Up project, first of all, which is a project we developed at Fondazione Brodolini with partners, with unions and research centers from 6 countries, and more specifically, the focus on Italy and Germany that me, together with Thomas Aipeter, a professor at the University of Duisburg, implemented for the purpose of the call for papers launched by the COGENS project. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. So first of all, the DongiGap project was implemented between 2018 and 2020, and it addressed mainly case studies of legislative initiatives or initiatives by union and grassroots movements to protect gig workers, platform workers across a set of countries, so Germany, Spain, France, Italy, Poland, and Sweden. The main results are the case study reports that are available on the website. You'll see the link at the end, and the list of policy recommendations. The focus of the article was on some case studies analyzed for Germany and Italy, and actually the findings themselves, the suggestions themselves, recall also some of the wider set of policy recommendations explored in DongiGap. We can move on. So first of all, also we had some desk research, We had some desk research over the feeders of platforms firms and especially of platform business model. So the findings can be summarized this way, as these findings are actually also more well known nowadays, than it was at the beginning of the project. But first of all, we see that they have a business model based usually at least on the extraction of value rather than the production of value. This means that the core activities of the platforms are actually implemented by external contractors or by staff which is hired as self-employed. Here we think about the most common, the most known platforms, especially such as those in the field of food delivery. The bulk of activities is implemented by restaurants, which are external contractors and produce the food, and by self-employed riders or couriers, as I prefer to call them, which deliver the food, but nevertheless are often contracted as micro-entrepreneurs, self-employed. So here we have the core feature of their business model, which is whereas over the latest 20 years, many countries, including Germany, Italy, France, and many others, have been developing and easing the possibility to use non-standard or self-employed schemes, because this was to support employment growth, and this was to be a flexibility of the margin for the companies to be able to answer market changes swiftly. In the end, we have these platforms which have a flexibility at the core of their business. So most of the workers, and especially the workers which are implementing their basic services, are treated as self-employed, so they're flexible, whereas a minor share of their workforce are employees, and those are the ones which are basically implementing some administrative tasks, some human resources management that in some case, in some other companies, is usually the share of activities which is actually externalized. This is a model which is not this is a model which is not common only for platforms. We can see it also in other businesses. In Italy, it's quite common actually also in the management of health services or time contracted out by public administrations. And the specific feature of platforms, which is what also made quite blurry the discussion about it, is that in the implementation of this model, they recur widely to algorithmic management and rating and ranking systems rather than to human interaction and assessment by managers. We can go to the next slide now. So I will go quickly through the German experiences, the German case studies, which were actually analyzed by Thomas Seibeder. First of all, we don't have any legislative initiative. We didn't have at the time of the project, and we don't have so far legislative initiative to protect platform workers. We had many initiatives actually by unions and grassroots movements. One of these is the Fair Crowd Work platform, actually by IG Metall, which is based on a very basic idea. So as platforms are using rating and ranking systems, why not to have workers reviewing the platforms they work for, and this way providing hints to other workers on whether to work or not for them. So the platform is still online. It is also developed together with unions from other countries, and interestingly, this brought about also a kind of quasi-bargaining with some platforms, as especially in the crowd work sector, some of them, led by TestBits, had a code of conduct which was meant to self-regulate their terms and conditions and answer some of their workers' needs. And this way, IG Metall managed to get in touch with them and also to have a revision of this code of conduct to accommodate some of the requests that workers themselves were expressing through the surveys implemented to populate the Fair Crowd Work platform. Among the achievements by IG Metall, there is the commitment by platforms to apply local usual wages, which is not a legal concept actually. Nevertheless, it is considered as a fifth step to have them applying the minimum wages, which is actually the union's request, and the establishment of an ombuds office, which at the time of the project actually even addressed more than 30 cases, so which is thought as a procedure to address cases of waiting, of ranking systems, or exclusion from the platforms which are considered unfair by the worker. We can go to the next slide. The other case from Germany concerned the attempt to establish a works council at Deliveroo. Interestingly, here we have a platform which Deliveroo, which opted at the beginning for flexible yet subordinate employment contracts. As in Germany, these employment contracts up to a certain amount of income are lower taxation, so that's the so-called mini jobs. The platforms initially went for this contract. The case is that those are subordinate, so the workers can set up works council, and they try to do so. There were many attempts by the company to stop them. The interesting thing is that at the beginning, workers succeeded. You can find details, of course, in the article, but at the beginning, they succeeded. They had elections, and many food delivery workers, many couriers were appointed. The case was that the company, after this loss, they decided simply not to renew the fixed-term employment contracts and to replace, especially for the elected representative, and more in general for the workforce at large, and to replace the fixed-term contract with self-employment contracts. So this way, they tear down the right itself to establish works council in the long run. Then Deliveroo actually even exited the German market. So also this experience can be considered as, we say at the end of the paper that this experience can be considered as a half full glass or a half empty glass, because depending on the way you see them, there is some success, but the actual achievements are quite limited. So we can move on to the Italian experiences. Actually, in Italy, we had quite some developments in terms of legislation and of case law, so I had to limit myself in the presentation of cases in the paper. There are more information, of course, on the website. And also today I will introduce only some cases which, in my opinion, represent kind of landmark example of what happened over the latest years. So even if some strikes spurred in Italy already in 2016 in Turin and in Milan, probably the starting point for the explosion of demonstration and also for a wider political attention on the topic was the development of quite a strong movement in Bologna, the riders' union, grassroots movements, which at the beginning actually faced some difficulties to enroll riders, but which gained much consensus during the severe snowfall occurred in November 2017, when the local platforms, the platforms active in Bologna decided not to stop activities despite this, they were requested by the movement to do so, and even by the municipality. So around the topic of ensuring health and safety of workers, rather than the topic of wages or the classification of workers, this movement managed to grow. And soon after sought for an interaction with the municipality of Bologna, which supported their request and invited platforms to discuss over a charter, so a non-binding agreement actually, over many aspects. This charter was eventually signed in May 2018, and it entailed a set of rights for a set of commitment actually by the signatory platforms, commitment to ensure minimum pays at least in line with the minimum wage set by collective agreements, some indemnities in case of bad weather condition, night work, and so forth, information rights for workers, the provision of individual protection equipment and insurance for damage against third parties, and also measure to, of course, interrupt activities in case of extreme weather condition. Extraordinary is the wording used in the charter, as they were supposed to do in November 2017. And a ban to reduce work opportunities in case the platform delivery workers refuses to accept delivery, because this is actually at the heart of most platforms. So even if you are allegedly free to accept whether to work or not, if you do not work, in the end you have a lower rating most often, and this means that you won't be able to accept work offers in the future. Again, if we consider the short-term results, this was a failure, simply because the major platforms did not sign it. There were only 2 local platforms, SNIAM and Memeno, signing the charter. And because even these 2 platforms, then later merged, are not always applying this requirement, and there are constant conflicts over the actual application of the charter. But we can move to the next slide and the next cases, because overlapping with this agreement, actually slightly later, social partners in the logistics sectors managed to achieve an agreement setting out especially rules on wages and working time of platform delivery workers enrolled as employees. So providing an opportunity for platforms to have flexible contractual schemes for yet framed by a collective agreement and by an employment contract. After the agreement, actually, there were also firm-level agreements with 2 very small local platforms in Florence, which nevertheless watered down significantly the provision of the sectoral agreement, basically opting for a piece-based pay, as even if the working hours are considered for platform workers, there is actually a standard per delivery. So in the end, the agreement ended up in a way, in order to show that platform workers can still be considered as employees, the agreement ended up watering down most of the provision, the most important provisions actually of the sectoral collective agreement. But we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, the most important the most important development so far is probably the Law 128/2019 on platform workers, which was introduced after 1 year of negotiation at the Ministry of Labor, where both grassroots movements like Riders Union and other small movements and large trade unions like CGL, CISNE, were invited and discussed with platforms over the possible solution for platform workers, either via collective bargaining or via legislation. In the end, this law was approved. It is quite peculiar as an approach, and I don't hide that it is actually quite criticized for the solution sought. I'll try to explain it shortly, even if this is affected by ongoing case law, actually, especially on the notion of hetero-organized work, which is a notion it builds over. So first of all, the law states that platform work, the presumption of hetero-organization for platform workers, which, as per the current case law, means that workers are enrolled with quasi-subordinate contracts, or with contracts which are still within the umbrella of self-employment contracts, yet there shall be applied most protection of employment schemes. Rules on hetero-organized work also enables collective bargaining to set specific rules for this category of workers in some sectors and setting the related wages and working conditions. So it was meant also as a push for platforms to enter negotiation with unions. At the same time, for what concerns, no, not yet. At the same time, for what concerns specifically self-employed food delivery platform workers, the legislation introduced some specific rules. And if you see these specific rules, so basically the law says you shall go for negotiation with unions, otherwise you should go for employment contracts. If you really do not want to apply these employment contracts, okay, in case they are self-employed, you have to apply these rules. And first of all, there is the right to an hourly pay set by collective agreement, plus some indemnities, at least 10% in case of night work, bad weather condition, or holiday work. There is a compulsory insurance against accident at work, even if these workers are self-employed. Most importantly, piece-based pay, so pay per delivery, basically, can be introduced only upon agreement with unions if these workers are self-employed. And also, for self-employed only, there is a ban to a reduction of working opportunities following refusal to accept deliveries. So basically, the rating systems based on the previous work can apply probably to employees, because there is no law stating that they cannot apply, but not for self-employed. So the law tried to push platforms to enter employment contracts or basically to negotiate conditions with unions. And first of all, we can see that many of these provisions actually recall the condition put forward by the Charter of Bologna. So in this meaning, the Charter of Bologna can be considered actually as successful. The case is that as for the current situation, Asso Delivery, which is the organization affiliating most multinational platform companies, signed a contract with the right-wing, probably not representative union, UGL, to apply piece-based pay and to consider platform workers as self-employed as such. Despite the ministry demonstrated and submitted a letter stating that in the opinion of the Ministry of Labour, this agreement is not valid over several grounds. And social partners in the transport sector are trying, leveraged on the law, actually to apply the same terms and conditions of employment to both subordinate and self-employed food delivery platform workers. So far, this is not applied. There is a breach. Anyway, there is that there was a company actually which exited Asso Delivery, which is Just Eat, so quite large, and it is starting to apply subordinate employment contracts, even if also some conflicts are arising. So it is yet to be seen what will happen in the future and what will be the behavior of other platforms. If we move to conclusions, we can see that these cases show that there is a capacity of grassroots movements and of unions to create conflict in platforms despite the hostile environment, and also to change the perception of platform work from something you can do as a second job, or something you can do if you like biking, for instance, or to earn an extra income, to the risk that there are of a worsening in terms of working condition, pay, and shift the focus over the attitude of many platforms to elude fiscal and labor rules. Nevertheless, the results are still limited, and most of the actions are still focused on the food delivery sectors. Nevertheless, we have seen how these platforms are especially building over the possibility to use and abuse actually many non-standard and self-employed contracts. So among the proposal we did with 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐵 and among the proposal of the paper, there are the closure of loopholes, so establishing, for instance, a minimum pay for all self-employed in a way, and establishing some limits for all non-standard contracts in order to make them not convenient for platforms, at least over a certain threshold compared to the standard permanent contracts. And also the ability of another very important point is that labor inspectorate and public authorities should be able to enforce quickly the labor legislation, and this was not the case, at least for Italy, at the beginning. Now we see that there are many actually trials and procedures even initiated by the public prosecutors' offices. Finally, whereas much debate, especially in labor law, is about the classification of platform workers as employees or as self-employed, it seems from these cases and other cases actually we saw with 𝖫𝐺𝐵 that the topics of working time and fair subcontracting are key once this problem is solved. So once we manage to have platform workers recognized as employees, this is not the end of the story. This is probably the beginning of another fight for them to have recognized all their working time as counting for the purpose of their wages, and to avoid platforms to subcontract dirty work to subcontractors, which are probably less known and to the public opinion. So you can find out more on the website 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐵.eu. Thank you for your attention, and stay available if you have any questions.
Giuliano, thank you for this excellent presentation, also for the paper. If you look at the chat box, then I keep filling up information on how to access the journal and the papers. So we will continue the order promised earlier. I would like to ask all of you to keep around like 15 minutes to have save some time for debate. Let's move on. Thank you for this lecture. And then now the second lecture will focus on the Brazilian trade unions. And our speaker will be Victor Radoan da Silva, who is a doctoral student in the Faculty of Law, University of Sao Paulo. Honestly, I always wanted to go to Brazil, but never managed. Probably it's not the time now, but maybe next year. Okay, it's my personal issue. So, Victor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think that my presentation is with the organization. If you share this, it will be perfect. Okay, thank you very much. So, thank you again for having me here. Thank you for the opportunity to publish our article with the Hungarian labor law e-journal. This article is called Representation Collective Bargaining of Brazilian Trade Unions in an Era of Apps Between the Old Corporatism and the Gig Economy. It was written by me and by my supervisor in the Faculty of Law of the University of São Paulo, Professor Antônio Rodrigues de Freitas Jr., who is an associate professor there. And so please, next slide. So if you look at the article contents and on the website of the e-journal, you see that there is a path that involves many important issues related to this main theme of the Brazilian reality. So first of all, we have an introduction, an update on technology and work, some core ideas on trade unions in the gig economy, and here I talk about some features of the European and US experiences, and delve into the Brazilian one. So this is the most important part of the article. We have here 4 points. First of all, the trade union system in Brazil with its corporatist roots and treaties related to these roots, exclusiveness, sector and territorial base. Second, we have some notice on trade union. Sorry, I have some difficulties of reading it. Notice on, okay, I'll shift here. Okay, some notice related to trade union reforms, road transportation and taxi drivers, a platform workers trade unionism, and some conclusion on this article. Next slide, please. Related to the introduction, we have the Brazilian labor law divides workers in 2 groups: independent contractors and employees. Employment relations in Brazil is based on 5 characters: legal subordination, work performed by a person, habitual work performed by someone specifically, and 5, work that is paid. And independent contractors in Brazil are almost ignored by Brazilian labor law. Next slide, please. Uber launched Uber Works in November 2019 with temporary staffing agencies. We have some questions regarding LinkedIn and its competitors, because it perhaps may be considered employment agencies intermediating employees and job seekers who may be classified as employees. And we have an umbrella situation that current labor markets have increasing number of people in the gray areas of employment relationships. So this is a short update on technology and work at the present moment. And next slide, please. Some core ideas on trade unions. So here, important things are related to ILO conventions. Number 87 related to freedom of association. Number 98 related to collective bargaining. Trade unions have protections in several documents, international documents: 1919 ILO Constitution, 1944 Declaration of Philadelphia, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Decent Work Agenda, 2008 Social Justice Declaration, and the Centenary Declaration of 2019. And the importance of the protections are all related to some equalization of employers and workers' voice in their negotiation. Next slide, please. Some experiences from Europe and the USA. In the USA, we have many experiences related to old trade unions and new organizations that do not have do not necessarily have these aspects, this feature of trade union, this specific characteristic of trade unions. And in Europe, we have quite the same experience. So we have, for example, the 2015 ordinance of the city of Seattle, the Independence Drivers Guard, that's really traditional in New York, rideshare drivers united in Los Angeles, informal organization of workers against Instacart. In Europe, we have also these traditional organizations and these new ones, and the courts and laws related to the theme. So GNB in the UK, trade unions of taxi drivers in Italy, general unions of workers, UGT in Spain, European Trade Union Confederation on decision of the Court of Justice of the European Union. So we have a variety of decisions related to trade unions, to platform workers, and these new evolvements. Next slide, please. So, Brazil, talking about Brazil more specifically, and here we have the core of our article. First of all, what's important for us to notice is that the basis of our trade union system is the 1943, look at the date, 1943 Consolidation of the Labor Law, COT. There we have the rule of exclusiveness, unicidade in Portuguese, determines that trade unions must be organized according to professional and economic sectors, categorias in Portuguese, as trade union, sindicato, refers to employees and employers, and in a territorial base territorial, not smaller than a municipality. So when we talk about trade union in Brazil, we refer to both employees and employers. So this is something really specific from the Brazilian experience. Trade unions in Brazil are private associations registered as so in the systems of the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Justice and Public Security, more specific in National Record of Trade Union Entities. So this heavy presence of the state registration, the trade union can exercise collective bargaining and sign collective labor agreements and collective labor covenants. The collective labor agreements are between the trade unions and the companies, and collective labor covenants between trade unions, employers trade unions and employees trade unions. Workers in the trade union are employees, excluding other types of workers, for example, volunteers, intern, casual workers, and trade unions of independent contractors. They are considered of economic sector, so they are considered employers in this system, not of professional ones, employees. Next slide, please. The corporate and what's the origin of the system? We have here corporatist roots that explain this situation, this framework. During the Getúlio Vargas government, there was an inspiration from the Italian fascism to impose his new state, Estado Novo, dictatorship, creating the CLT, the official trade unionism, and the specialized labor justice. This corporatist incidence is related to the evolvements in 1930s and the 1940s in eroded Western liberal democracies, such as in Spain, in Argentina, and in Portugal. And Brazil is part of this Ibero-American space, so it's natural that we have these influences from Spain, Portugal, and South America. The corporatist ideas have a core that is the shift in the institutional center from the parliament, political parties, to the professional social chambers, workers' employment associations. The rule of exclusiveness is present in all Brazilian constitutions since the 1937 one, including the enforced 1988 Federal Constitution, CF. Next slide, please. Exclusiveness sector territorial base. Economic sector is related to solidarity among entrepreneurs of similar, identical, or related activities, and the company that performs more than one activity joins the sector referred to the main activity. Example, construction sector. The professional sector, on the other hand, has to have similarities of living conditions that a job in an economic activity offers, for example, metal workers. Other possibilities are differentiated professional sectors, employees who have unique living conditions, for example, secretaries, and liberal professionals, independent contractors or employees with the professional council. The example here, the Brazilian Bar Association. Physicians are always in this category here. Nonetheless, the dichotomy independent contractor/employee remains, which reinforces the importance of the classification litigation, the good old classification litigation. Next slide, please. In practice, what we can see, here we have an example from the CLT, the 1943 norm that we have in Brazil. We have the National Confederation of Land Transportation, that is nowadays National Confederation of the Transportation, CNT, that is the company one, that is the trade union of the companies. And we have, on the other hand, the National Confederation of Workers in Land Transportation, CNTTT, that covers the employees in office of road transportation companies. So we have here this corporatism, trade unionism in practice. Next slide, please. Many trade unions. What about the reforms? Many trade unions we have in Brazil. What about the reforms? We have in Brazil many trade unions, and these benefit from the cooperative system as they do not have competition, which demands the mobilization of stakeholders, federal government, judiciary branches, perhaps having the 𝐂𝐸 as a consultant. The 2017 labor reform suppressed the compulsory aspect of trade union contribution paid by employers and workers to fund their respective trade unions, and allowed derogation of state norms by collective negotiated ones, impacting the principle of most favorable norm to the work. And the ILO Convention number 87 is still unratified. So we have these evolvements, these recent evolvements in the trade unionism in Brazil. Next slide, please. Here we have another table that is related to the official records of trade unions in the transportation sector. We have this also. Hello? Okay. We have this difference between the employers and employees. So we have 𝖫𝖺essi𝖾, the trade union of self-employed taxi drivers in São Paulo, that are related to the group of employers. And 𝖫န့Taxi SP, the trade unions of drivers and workers in taxi companies in the state of São Paulo, that is a trade union related to employees in the state of São Paulo. Next slide, please. If we see the records of Uber in the federal revenue in Brazil, we have here in the main economic activity, we have intermediation activities and agencies of services and business in general, except real estate. We do not have mention to the transportation service. Next slide, please. Why is this important? Because the trade union of Uber is the one representing the employers in the economic activity, intermediation activities, and agency of services and business in general, except real estate, not the transportation. Trade union of Uber employees, the one represented the employees in the economic activity above, exception to the differentiated professional sectors. Uber drivers, if they are classified as independent contractors, they will not be covered by the trade union of the Uber employees. The ride-hailing app drivers do not essentially differ from other drivers, which makes specific trade unions unlikely. Some associations are wrongly referred in Brazil as trade unions, having the possibility to negotiate with Uber, but without the representation erga omnes of the professional sector or the prerogative to oblige Uber to take part in the negotiation. So they are common associations. Next slide, please. And as a matter of conclusion, we have the 1988 Federal Constitution guaranteeing both the rule of exclusiveness and the freedom of association. Classification litigation remains fundamental to Uber drivers and all the platform workers to create and join trade unions that can collective bargaining with Uber and other platform companies. Informal collective organizations are a real possibility, which may put an increasing number of workers aside the formal labor system because they do not have a trade union to defend them. And democracy in the workplace may benefit not only shareholders but also stakeholders. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Just to let you know, in my case, the slides were not legible. So I propose for Jose Maria to make the slides available on the website if it's possible later. So I didn't really see what was written on the slides. But otherwise, thank you for this outlook. A little bit switch from our European way of thinking to a similar and at the same time different system. And now we turn to the third lecture. Emma Rodriguez is our special guest for the third lecture, who will focus on the right to collective bargaining, what I love. I'm looking forward to your lecture, and your excellent paper is available on the website. Emma is an associate professor in labor and social security law at the University of Vigo, so just around the corner from Santiago. Emma, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these words. Es verdad, estoy al lado de Santiago. Tengo esa suerte de poder compartir más proximidad con ellos. Mi intervención la haré en castellano. Me imagino que todos tendréis ahora la presentación a vuestra disposición en unos minutos o en un momentito y podré comenzar. Gracias. Y también está en castellano, pero con la traducción en la que me he comprometido a hablar despacio, pues me imagino que podréis seguirme perfectamente. Mis primeras palabras son desde luego de alegría por encontrarme en esta plataforma con todos estos eminentes colegas y poder participar y disfrutar de este congreso tan maravilloso, magnífico, que nos han organizado nuestros queridos profesores y amigos, muy amigos de la Universidad de Santiago, José María, Yolanda y Lidia, a los que, bueno, pues ya felicito, doy la enhorabuena con todo mi cariño y agradezco la oportunidad de estar aquí compartiendo, como digo, con todos vosotros este día. Mi tema, como veis, es la negociación colectiva de los trabajadores autónomos en la nueva economía y para ello he organizado en la siguiente diapositiva se ve el sumario, es una pena que efectivamente no se distingue bien. Yo voy a tratar 4 temas principales: la importancia de los derechos colectivos ante las nuevas realidades empresariales, la regulación normativa de la libre competencia versus el derecho a la negociación colectiva, siendo este un punto importante en lo que se refiere a la regulación o la posibilidad de regulación del derecho o del papel de la negociación colectiva respecto de estos nuevos trabajadores. Y esto lo completamos con los criterios del Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea, como no puede ser de otra manera, para armonizar estos derechos que decimos, lo he puesto entre comillas, condenados a entenderse. Y finalmente terminaré con unas reflexiones que nos llevan inexorablemente a la necesaria protección de los derechos colectivos de estos trabajadores autónomos que yo he calificado, como muchos autores han hecho ya, como autónomos vulnerables. Bien, siguiente diapositiva, por favor. En esta diapositiva se aprecia muy mal, pero como veis tenemos que comenzar con una mínima, aunque sea mínima, contextualización. El imparable desarrollo de la innovación tecnológica, la robotización, la automatización, la inteligencia artificial y su impacto en las estructuras sociales y en la reformulación del consumo, del binomio, consumo-producción, constituyen un desafío sobre el que se diseña el futuro del trabajo que queremos, tal y como se ha referido a esto la Organización Internacional del Trabajo. Es una realidad que esta cuarta revolución industrial ha supuesto un importante cambio en las profesiones que van a demandar los nuevos modelos productivos en detrimento de aquellas menos tecnológicas. Así, antes de entrar o antes de meternos en la materia concreta, es evidente o tenemos que partir de las consecuencias o los paradigmas que ha puesto de manifiesto esta digitalización de la producción, en el sentido de una brecha, se produce un desempleo tecnológico. El Foro Mundial calcula que en 2022 el 50% de las empresas esperan que la automatización lleve a cabo una reducción del 50% de la fuerza de trabajo a tiempo completo. Por lo tanto, gracias a las nuevas tecnologías, en realidad se va a poder disfrutar de más tiempo libre o ese tiempo libre puede repercutir, por desgracia, en un aumento, que es lo que yo pongo de relieve en la diapositiva, aunque no se lee, de las brechas y las desigualdades. Precisamente las brechas a las que más va a afectar esta digitalización de la economía y que afecta directamente a este tipo de trabajos y de trabajadores autónomos vulnerables son la brecha de género, en el sentido de que el tipo de profesiones que se requieren son estudiadas o son ocupadas fundamentalmente por hombres, y también tenemos una brecha de edad. Va a aumentar, y ya se ha visto, el desempleo de las personas de mayor edad por menor profesionalización en relación con este tipo de empleos. Por lo tanto, parece bastante claro que la desigualdad va a aumentar, y en este sentido tenemos que poner desde el derecho del trabajo y la seguridad social. Yo me encuentro en Vigo porque estoy en otro congreso y realmente aquí nos decían ayer que efectivamente la desigualdad ha aumentado, e incluso ha aumentado mucho más a raíz de la crisis del COVID, lo que ha conllevado y lo que va a conllevar una nueva regulación, pero también una aceleración, por lo menos en España, de lo que supone la digitalización. Bueno, y de qué, centrándonos un poco más, la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Bien, de esta se ve mejor porque he utilizado bastantes imágenes, por suerte, entonces a lo mejor es más fácil de seguir. ¿De qué estamos hablando? ¿De quién estamos hablando? ¿De qué tipos de trabajadores estamos hablando? Pues en realidad en las fotografías que comparto con vosotros se ejemplifican cuestiones que vivimos en el día a día. El concepto de trabajador precario, que es ese concepto de trabajador atípico y ese trabajador que efectivamente va a proliferar, tal y como nos ha puesto de manifiesto la resolución del Parlamento Europeo de verano del 2017, llamando la atención sobre estas formas atípicas de trabajo o trabajadores periféricos que nos llama la atención por su proliferación. Bien, pues lo que nos dice es que en realidad estos trabajadores precarios no tienen por qué ir unidas a estas formas de trabajo atípico o formas de trabajo flexible. En realidad, esto se ha propagado en los nuevos sectores de actividad, pero es el momento, yo creo que es el momento de ponerle cota y de esta manera, si bien el trabajo precario no es una consecuencia ineludible del trabajo atípico, sí suele acompañarlo y, por lo tanto, es el momento de que el derecho laboral pues tome cartas en el asunto y, sobre todo, como dice la Organización Internacional del Trabajo, que los interlocutores sociales, desempeñando un papel fuerte y central en esta nueva economía, pues pongan esas cotas o intenten eliminar, y así en ello tiene que avanzarse en el diálogo social a la hora de limitar o a la hora de erradicar ese concepto de trabajador pobre o pobreza laboriosa. En ese sentido, como digo, el papel de los interlocutores sociales será fundamental. Siguiente diapositiva, perdón porque voy un poco descompensada con las diapositivas de mi intervención. Bien, en esta diapositiva precisamente llamo la atención sobre la necesaria actualización de los derechos colectivos, tal y como digo, ha llamado la atención la Organización Internacional del Trabajo precisamente a través de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible que recogen esta necesaria reformulación y ese fortalecimiento de los derechos colectivos ante estas nuevas realidades y para ello la negociación colectiva jugará un papel fundamental y por eso se reconoce de manera explícita el diálogo social como fuente y como imperativo a través del carácter, a través de los instrumentos como puede ser los convenios de la OIT, a través de las instrucciones del Comité de Libertad Sindical, pueden mantener y han de mantener pues acotar, ya lo he dicho, la pobreza laboriosa, intentando erradicarla y destruyendo ese binomio al que me refería de trabajador precario y trabajador atípico. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Bien, en esta que se ve fatal, perdonad, ahí me refiero a los derechos en juego que tenemos encima de la mesa cuando hablamos del nuevo trabajador autónomo, por decirlo así, o este autónomo vulnerable y el derecho a la negociación colectiva. En el ámbito de la Unión Europea, son derechos condenados a entenderse. En el ámbito de la Unión Europea, pues tenemos una regulación que ha venido, es que se lee fatal en la diapositiva, así que voy a echar mano de mis apuntes, perdonad. Os decía, tenemos una interpretación limitativa de esta expansión innata de las normas antitrust y en realidad lo que pretendían estas normas era luchar o poner cota al dumping social. Sabemos que las sentencias Viking, Laval y Ruffer fueron desastrosas o fueron trágicas, haciendo una una traducción literal de alguna denominación que se le ha dado en relación con los derechos de negociación colectiva de los trabajadores en la Unión Europea. Pero también sabemos que la Carta de Derechos Fundamentales recoge en el artículo 28 el derecho a la negociación colectiva y en el artículo 26 el derecho a la libre empresa. ¿Quiere decir esto que un derecho está por encima del otro? No, lo que quiere decir claramente la Unión Europea, y así lo ha reconocido la Directiva 1152 de 2019, en su propio preámbulo, reconoce y nos recuerda que el Tratado Fundacional reconoce a los interlocutores sociales su principal función relativa a la defensa de los derechos colectivos de los trabajadores. Y además nos recuerda una cláusula que se recoge en el artículo 101.3 del mismo tratado, donde declara inaplicables las reglas sobre la competencia a los acuerdos de empresa o a las decisiones de asociaciones empresariales, dice, o cualquier otra práctica similar, y insiste, que contribuyan a mejorar la producción, la distribución de los productos o fomentar el progreso técnico o económico y reserven al mismo tiempo una participación equitativa en el beneficio resultante. Bien, esta cláusula me parece, la he citado literalmente porque es el principio general de lo que se ha venido a denominar como la inmunidad básica o limitada del derecho de la libre competencia frente al derecho de la negociación colectiva. De manera que parece que podríamos quedarnos tranquilos, pero vamos a ver qué dice el Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Gracias. Ay, perdón, se me ha colado una referencia que quería haceros pensando que se vería mejor, la referencia a cómo se regula en el modelo español los derechos colectivos de los autónomos. Brevemente os diré que se reconoce en nuestro texto constitucional el derecho a la negociación colectiva y el derecho a la libertad de empresa, de manera paralela a lo que acabo de decir respecto a la Unión Europea. Pero, y voy a volver a mirar mis diapositivas aquí, porque ahí es que no veo nada, pero es cierto que tenemos una ley de trabajadores autónomos que específicamente reconoce una especie de negociación para determinados trabajadores autónomos, ¿vale? Para trabajadores autónomos que no tengan trabajadores a su cargo. Creo que en este concepto de trabajador autónomo, según la ley española, que puede realizar acuerdos, se llaman acuerdos de interés profesional, no son negociación colectiva pura, los acuerdos de interés profesional puede encauzarse, ya lo voy adelantando para adelantarme a las conclusiones, podría encauzarse parte de esa protección que la negociación colectiva debe dispensar o los derechos colectivos de estos trabajadores autónomos vulnerables en la nueva economía y que cada vez van a proliferar más, y perdonad la reiteración, que los tribunales de justicia estén reconociendo en algunos casos que parecían bastante evidentes, y lo ha hecho el español, la laboralidad de muchos de ellos, pero en otros casos seguiremos encontrándonos con autónomos y verdaderos autónomos. Por lo tanto, creo que es importante que los instrumentos nacionales que existan se lleven a las máximas consecuencias para dar cabida y para dar una protección a este tipo de trabajador. También recojo en esa diapositiva, que tampoco se ve, como la ley orgánica, que es el máximo rango de nuestras leyes, pues la ley orgánica de libertad sindical cuenta con un artículo en el que también se refiere a la posibilidad de sindicación de este tipo de trabajadores. Yo me preguntaba, entonces, la diapositiva termina con dos preguntas. Una sobre el tema de las huelgas, no voy a profundizar, pero la otra es si podrán los trabajadores autónomos llegar a acuerdos colectivos sobre condiciones de prestación de sus servicios. Esto nos coloca, por ejemplo, en el ámbito español, ante una tesitura complicada, verdaderamente. La semana que viene tenemos aquí unas jornadas presenciales al 100% en la Universidad de Vigo, que tengo el honor de dirigir, precisamente sobre el sector TIC. ¿Puede el sector TIC negociar un convenio colectivo a nivel, por ejemplo, comunidad autónoma, que sería para Galicia, donde nos encontramos Santiago, Vigo y 2 provincias más? ¿Puede? ¿Existe legitimidad? Estas son normas técnicas, más de derecho interno, pero si la diapositiva funcionase bien, creo que podría transmitiroslo con más facilidad, así no voy a insistir. Volviendo a la Unión Europea, ¿qué nos dice? Siguiente diapositiva. ¿Qué nos dice el Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión? Bueno, gracias, es clásico. Aquí veis que ponía los 3 criterios que se utilizan por la jurisprudencia, la clásica jurisprudencia que muchos seguro que conocéis, que viene de la sentencia de la saga Albany, que en realidad todo comienza por un fondo de pensiones, por lo tanto una cuestión alejada de lo que estamos tratando hoy aquí, pero cómo esto repercute o no sobre el trabajador según sea trabajador en el concepto estricto o sea un trabajador autónomo en el concepto al que yo me estoy refiriendo, sin trabajadores a su cargo. Bien, pues la sentencia se centra en 3 criterios fundamentales para determinar cómo opera esa cláusula limitativa del derecho a la libre competencia o a la libre empresa del artículo 101 del Tratado Fundacional, reconociendo, por lo tanto, que la negociación colectiva quedaría aparte de esas cláusulas limitativas, como digo. ¿Para ello qué exige? Bueno, que lo que se pacte tenga naturaleza laboral, además que no se incurra en tratamientos discriminatorios, se prohíbe la discriminación, se prohíbe en realidad que se acuda a la negociación colectiva para falsear, para actuar en fraude de ley, limitando el precio de las cosas o actuando pues, de manera fraudulenta en lo que sería el libre mercado. Y lo que es más interesante, desde mi punto de vista, porque esto escapa un poco, aunque está tratado en mi artículo, escapa un poco al ámbito laboral estricto, pero incluso lo más interesante, en lo que han incidido otras sentencias más recientes, del año 2014, etcétera, es sobre el ámbito subjetivo, precisamente, de aplicación al que se refiere estrictamente o sobre el que tenemos que interpretar esta limitación del criterio limitativo, como digo, o de no injerencia, o qué acuerdos están verdaderamente protegidos frente a la libre competencia. ¿También los de los trabajadores autónomos? Bueno, pues los vaivenes de la jurisprudencia del Tribunal de Justicia acaban concluyendo con la última sentencia del 2014, FNV Fuster, la tenéis ahí referenciada, por desgracia no se ve bien, pero se acaba la disquisición señalando que lo importante es que se abarque a trabajadores que realmente operen como trabajadores subordinados a un empresario, sin importar el calificativo que la norma nacional le otorgue. Es más, esta sentencia a la que me estoy refiriendo, de 4 de diciembre de 2014, va un paso más adelante y directamente dice que, o hace una referencia a que estos trabajadores son falsos autónomos. Esto ha sido utilizado también para esa definición de qué es el falso autónomo y, en definitiva, reconoce y establece que queda excluida del ámbito de aplicación, por lo tanto, de la limitación del derecho que impone la libre competencia. Y en la siguiente diapositiva Reflejo algunos ejemplos de cambio que se han ido llevando a cabo en la Unión Europea en relación con la huelga. Bueno, tenía ahí una huelga del sindicato Verdi de Amazon, que seguro que todos conocéis, y la de arriba, que es lo que no se lee, bueno, no se lee nada, pero la de arriba que está en azul, ahí me refería al quinto acuerdo laboral de ámbito estatal para el sector de la hostelería, publicado, es español, publicado el 29 de marzo de 2019, donde su artículo 4 recoge referencias a incluir en su ámbito de aplicación a las plataformas digitales y dice o actividades de distribución que se realicen a través de la misma y habla del reparto de comidas, etc. Lo interesante de esto es que no se refiere a trabajadores en el sentido estricto, sino que incluye en su ámbito de aplicación a cualquier plataforma que se dedique a esto, con lo que podemos entender que podrían estar incluidos trabajadores autónomos de estos vulnerables a los que no se les reconozca porque a lo mejor no tengan por qué serlo trabajadores por cuenta ajena. Digo porque en el ámbito español hemos dado un paso importante en lo que se refiere al reconocimiento de la laboralidad de los trabajadores de este sector de reparto de comida. Pero, ya digo, fue un avance muy importante en su momento y creo que todavía lo constituye por esa interpretación que podría llegar a darse más expansiva. Y para concluir, la siguiente diapositiva. Bien, en esas reflexiones conclusivas, que pongo al robot y a un muñeco pensando, pues creo que la primera conclusión es que tenemos que repensar el derecho del trabajo, tenemos que avanzar y tenemos que reformular muchos hándicaps o valores que tenemos fijos y para ello creo que es importante reformular y recalcar el valor principal que desempeñan los sindicatos en el ámbito de los derechos laborales y también están llamados a desempeñar esa función fundamental en relación con estos trabajadores, estos nuevos trabajadores. Creo que en el ámbito de la negociación colectiva debemos de ahondar en el convenio colectivo de sector. ¿Por qué no un convenio colectivo de sector para trabajadores, por ejemplo, de las TICs, como os decía? Creo que hay que avanzar en las reglas técnicas que se refieren a la legitimación, etcétera, y, en definitiva, avanzar hacia un nuevo contrato social que, como dice el Comité Europeo de Derechos Sociales del Consejo de Europa en la declaración de 12 de septiembre de 2018, ya viene a reclamar el papel central del derecho a la negociación colectiva de los trabajadores autónomos, que además está protegido en el artículo 6.2 de la Carta Social. Y hasta aquí me quedo, última diapositiva, agradeciéndoos desde este paraje maravilloso en el que estoy vuestra atención y además la paciencia que tiene conmigo siempre hoy y también por escrito cuando le mando bueno, pues mis textos y él amablemente siempre corrige y siempre está ahí pendiente de todos los que tenemos el honor de publicar en la revista que él dirige. Muchas gracias y quedo a vuestra disposición.
Excellent lecture. I'm sorry for pressing you. I can hear myself. Could you please change the voice, because otherwise I hear the echo of my voice. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm a little bit confused because I had the news first that 𝖫ฉิ่ცი will not be able to join us, and then I have the information that she is here. So I suppose that she's going to speak. I have a good news. You are here, and we are very happy that you're here. The bad news is that the three speakers left you 17 minutes, and at 1 o'clock we have the final session. So I would firmly like to ask you to keep 15 minutes. Now we're able to get to 16, and there is no time for questions in that case. If you're shorter, we can have some questions. Joanna is from Dinya University, and the same applies. The floor is yours. Up to the time she joins us, I open the floor for questions. If she turns up, then we stop answering questions. I'm looking forward to the questions in the chat box, and I would also like to invite our speakers to reflect to each other.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, all right. Good, because I'm really totally confused about this platform, because I can't really see whether I'm on or off or anything. Right, all right. So again, thank you very much for having me here, and for I do apologize that I could not be present before, and I do apologize for some misunderstanding concerning whether I will be able to hear or not. Well, that's life. As you can see, my presentation is about the theme, well, basically very strictly connected to the whole conference, that is collective bargaining for platform workers. And could I have the next slide, please? And what I wanted to talk about most of all is the issue of possibility of using new technologies for the purposes of collective bargaining of platform workers. Probably because we are going towards the end of the conference, it is already obvious for everyone that collective bargaining among platform workers and for platform workers takes place already, even though I would like to remind everybody, and myself of course as well, that there is, in my opinion, there is nothing like one type of platform workers or one type of platforms. They vary between each other very significantly, and it also has an impact on their capabilities and on the possibilities of having collective bargaining. While, for example, so-called on-location, lower-skilled platforms, that organization is very close in many cases to labor relations, does happen to be under a collective bargaining process. On the other hand, for example, online lower skilled workers are usually not covered by the process. They are very, very rarely represented. However, can I have the next slide, please? However, what these various types of platforms do have in common is the fact that very often they use algorithmic management as a significant element of management of the company. And what is characteristic to this type of management practices is that well, first of all, there is huge amount of data collected by the employer from work. And I'm using the term worker in a very general manner in this moment. So from one hand, there is this huge amount of data which could be in some cases important, necessary, and relevant to the management process, to the functioning of the platform, but also there are some other that probably doesn't have to be collected and doesn't have to be proceeded by the employer. And these data allow the employer to track what is happening to workers, whether they are working, what they are doing, where they are. It also allows, usually through evaluation done by clients, to evaluate workers' performance. And also algorithmic management procedures allow to shape remuneration, allow to influence behavior of workers, for example, proposing lower rates for the periods of time when demand for work is lower and higher when the case is opposite. And finally, this whole situation creates environment where workers' interaction with other people is actually very limited, which for some workers may be a benefit and for some other serious drawback. And also, which is actually quite common and which appears in many other pieces of research, is that the systems are completely not transparent. Let us go to the next slide, and perhaps even to yes. As you probably remember, some 5 years ago, 4 years ago, there's been a lot of discussions on whether it is at all possible to unionize platform workers regardless of type of a platform, and there were serious doubts about it. There were serious doubts about possibility to create trade unions, to the workers joining trade unions, and of course, even to a larger extent, to whether it is possible to carry on collective bargaining. And of course, still some problems, some challenges remain. Still, the level of unionization of platform workers is quite low. And there are, of course, reasons for that. One of them would be status of workers, which I'm not going to discuss here. It is also the status of very organizations that are created by workers, because sometimes they are more of self-help communities. But these doubts do not make it completely impossible for the workers to unite. And also, it appears that even traditional trade unions that were active in different branches and different fields of activity, are beginning to perceive platform workers as their valid members and begin to create an environment that would allow them actually to put it in a most simple way, to defend their rights. In consequence, of course, could I have two more, the second next slide, please? Yes, thank you. And of course, as you already know, there are many examples of collective agreements concluded for the benefit of platform workers. And here I just give two examples. One of them is, we could say, kind of milestone example of the agreement concluded by the Danish platform that was called very often, that is referred very often as a first ever collective agreement for platform workers, and which is at the same time very positive example of collective agreement, giving platform workers significant rights, recognizing their status as employees, etc. On the other hand, as you can see, there are some examples of collective agreements that are actually, although they were although they were concluded, they are criticized from the very beginning, inter alia, for the fact that the social partners with whom on trade union side the collective was concluded is not a representative one. On the other hand, that there are some significant disadvantages of this agreement as far as, for example, the status of worker is concerned. And having said that, could I have the next slide, please? I think it is worthwhile to pay some attention to new technologies that can be used both in the process of collective bargaining and in relations between workers and employer, workers and trade unions. And one of them are automated negotiations that are used in many other instances, and would, through their mechanism, allow, for example, to actively negotiate pay rates as we go, having in regard whether, for example, having in regard, for example, demand for work, certain other circumstances connected to, conditions in which the work is performed. And another technology that is actually intertwined with that is API interface, which could allow the workers and their representatives, that is usually trade unions, to make use of the huge amount of data collected by the employer. And they could be used, we could say, in a very safe way, also from the perspective of the employer. And by that I mean that, first of all, it is always the employer who would decide which data to make available. It can of course be a matter of negotiation as well as while using this technology, normally it is not for workers themselves, it is not for trade unions to directly access data. So they would work on the data that would be provided by the employer. And this data could be...
Joanna, you will hate me now, but we have a final section at 1 o'clock, so you have exactly...
I know.
Okay.
3 minutes, I know. And they could be, for example, used for the purpose of working time. It could be used for the purpose of health and safety also. So I think it is worthwhile to take account on that. Finally, perhaps we could go to the last slide with the text, and I'll conclude with that. The next one, please. And the next one. Yes, perfect. I think that still we have to say that there is a large deficit of formal social dialogue, especially in the middle level, that is in the sectoral level, or, anywhere between national level and a company level. Nevertheless, it does develop. Nevertheless, it could or should take into account also some technical possibilities and advantages that are available, especially for platform workers, because of the form of work that is being performed. And the final statement that I think is worth considering is carrying out negotiations also at the supranational level, especially that many platforms like Uber, but also many others, do operate in various countries, and perhaps considering dialogue on that level also could be beneficial for workers, but also for the employers. So I will conclude here. Thank you very much for giving me time. And we'll continue with the plenary session, I suppose. Thank you.
Very disciplined and very sorry. Thank you for keeping the time. And I've just received a message from Jose Maria that the final session will start at 1:10. So if you would like to yourself or the colleagues would like to add anything, or there is any other question, please do not hesitate to pose it. So, Joanna, the floor could be yours if you want to add anything else, but I can give the floor to the other lecturers or the participants.
I think that since it happened so that I had to really squeeze it in 15 minutes, I think it would be better to continue with the discussion. And if any questions occur, I'm here and I will be happy to answer or to develop on, well, anything that caught your interest.
Are changing. I've just received a message from Jose Maria that I have to close the session, so I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, and thank you all for your valuable papers. I love them all. Welcome from all around the world. It's so nice to meet you, and I hope to see you personally. Thanks for the speakers, thanks for the participants for choosing us, and see you in Santiago or at the final session in 10 minutes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.